Welcome, everyone. My name is Sandra Reimer, and I work with TourMagination on their communications. And we are very privileged today to have Alan Rudy Froese with us to talk to us about the Church and Theatre in London tour. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Alan. After nearly 2 decades in pastoral ministry in Manitoba and Ontario, Alan went back to school to complete a PhD in homiletics, which is the art and theology of preaching. He has been professor of Christian proclamation at AMBS in Elkhart, Indiana for 5 years. Alan teaches classes in preaching, vocal communication, worship, ritual, biblical storytelling, and pastoral leadership. Recent research interests include God's grace in Mennonite and Lutheran preaching, stage fright, and Christian persuasion in various mediums: song, architecture, theater, preaching, and visual art, from the Reformation era to the present. When not on the AMBS campus, Alan enjoys leading workshops and seminars in Canada and the USA for an oral communication, worship leading, storytelling, and preaching. He leads and teaches with humor, warmth, and plenty of interactive games and exercises. And when he's not doing all that, Alan enjoys cooking, reading sci-fi novels, listening to classic rock, and taking voice and acting lessons. Alan lives in Goshen, Indiana with his wife, Marilyn, who serves as a pastor. Now, Marilyn has moved on and she's no longer living in Indiana.
Right. Yeah.
She lives back in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And she is a pastor to pastors.
Yes. At Mennonite Church, Eastern Canada. Yeah.
Mennonite Church, Eastern Canada. That's awesome. Alan, why don't you take it away?
Okay, I will take it away. Great. Well, thank you very much for attending this webinar. Marilyn and I are really looking forward to this, to leading this trip in, I guess, about 10 months. I want to look at the description of this webinar or this tour just briefly to just catch a few things that are there. One of the ways we worded this was kind of cheeky and kind of ironic, and this is exactly the kind of thing we want to play with. So, church performances highlight heavenly ideals and lofty music and a holy meal and sacred rituals, and theater gatherings often focus on down-to-earth stories full of debauchery, intrigue, and humor. Well, we kind of played with this. So normally one would say church gatherings are like this, and we often say that theater performances are like this. But really, there's a lot of similarities between a church gathering and a church performance, and a theater performance and a church gathering. So we're trying to blur the lines here a little bit and kind of separate out and see what's similar and what's different between what happens in church Sunday morning and what happens in the theater. We could easily say that in theater, we also visit ideals and lofty music and sacred rituals. And often in church, in worship, we also visit down-to-earth reality, intrigue and humor and debauchery, sin. Yes, we visit all of those things. Theater and the church visit high and lofty ideals as well as down-to-earth humanity. And so this is one of the connections that we're looking at when we do this tour, Embodying Truth, Church and Theatre in London. I want to show, let me see. So this is me and Marilyn. This was our, when we were in London in 2016 with a TourMagination tour. We were actually on this tour. We went to London and Paris and Berlin and a few places in between. And we were looking at Reformations, old and new. And when we were in London on this trip in 2016, Marilyn and I thought, oh, we should do a tour where we're just in London and we just spend time in churches and in theaters and to see what that interplay looks like. So that's what we're looking forward to here. So there's a lot of similarities between the church and the theater. So look what's happening right here. We have people who are on stage who've rehearsed, and they are presenting their bodies and their voices for people who are sitting down and receiving. But they're not also just receiving. The audience, they are performers as well. They are responding with laughter or with And the actors are quite well aware of what the audience is doing. So there's that image. But there's another image. There's the church. Again, we have people who are using their bodies and voices, and they're standing up, and they are the ones who are leading in this case. And there are those who are sitting, who are the audience, the congregation, but they're more active than simply, they're not simply sitting there and just receiving it. They are also responding to what's happening in hymns and in readings and with gestures. They're using their bodies to respond as well. So there's just a little bit of a similarity between theater and the church. Again, we in theater and in church, we are there for a specific time, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. There's an order to it. There's Act 1, Act 2. There's the gathering. There's the praising. There's the sermon. We have these orders to what we do, and we expect, whether it's church or whether it's theater, we expect a particular order to that. So we're going to look at all of these different things and experience them in London on this tour. London is a prime location as well to see and hear and touch and see the sometimes rosy, sometimes rocky relationship between church and theater. The churches and the theaters have always had a relationship. At some points, theater has supported the church and done plays and written plays and performed plays that support the church. And then Shakespeare comes along and others, and they start writing plays that aren't about the church and that actually critique the church, even while still naming the church as an important part of society. So with Shakespeare, we have a departure from a certain kind of theater into another kind of theater that is more popular with those who are actually not attending church that much. But the people who are attending church are also quite interested in seeing the debauchery and the humor and the lust and the pride that are there in the theater. We'll notice in London a great divide between the river. The south part of the river is where the Globe Theatre is, and the north part of the river is where the wealthy or aristocrats live. And we'll see the interplay between those two areas, one where it's highly churched and one where it's highly not churched, or where there's theater and all the things that go with that. So let me give you a little bit of background into why I'm interested in this at all. This is a picture of me working with some students at AMBS. I teach at Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary in Elkhart, Indiana. I also teach a preaching course at Conor Grable University College in Waterloo. And this is me actually working with some youth who were on the AMBS campus for the summer, for a part of the summer. And here we are doing some exercises, some acting exercises actually, and some games that get their bodies and their voices ready to preach. They were going to preach and lead worship, so we were getting their bodies ready for this. I got into this connection between the theater and church when I started being a pastor in 1992 at Rockaway Mennonite Church in Kitchener, Ontario. And I was a wreck all day Saturday because I was so nervous about preaching on Sunday morning. And what I decided to do was to go take some acting classes in a local theater there. And then I got the acting bug. Well, it was a bit of an acting bug, but it was mostly, I was mostly interested in the kind of exercises for voice and body that actors do to get ready to perform, because I knew this could help me as a preacher. So I've been taking voice lessons, and mostly voice lessons, but also acting lessons for the last 25 years. And I also teach these. I teach preaching and biblical storytelling and worship leading. And I also teach a class on voice for speakers in the church, whether preaching or worship leading or song leading or storytelling. And a lot of our time is spent in vocal and body exercises to get our bodies ready, not to perform in a fake way, but actually to perform in a genuine way. Sometimes we use this word performance as a negative word like he is just performing or she is just performing. I use the word in a broad and general and positive sense. A lot of us we're always performing. I'm performing right now. I'm also being very genuine. And one of the things that we're looking for in preaching and storytelling and so on is to be genuine, to embody the truth. That's what actors are looking for as well in the theater. They want to embody the truth in some way. So what will we do in London? Well, we are going to visit a lot of churches and participate, and we're going to visit a lot of theaters and also participate in ways that we can. So we will, one of our first visits is Westminster Abbey for Evensong, and I think the boys' choir will be there that night. We will go to the Globe Theatre, which is where Shakespeare's works were first performed. This is a recreation of it. Notice that there are wooden benches. We will be sitting on mostly wooden benches in this place. It's really a recreation of what was there. You may be able to see the floor there. There will be people would stand on the floor at the very bottom. Those are the cheap seats, and we will see that as well. I think we're sitting though. So not only will we see a play one evening there, but we'll also spend the afternoon there. It's sort of a backstage pass to see some of the things that they're working on. We'll probably get to see some of the costumes and how those are made, and how a scene comes together and that kind of thing. We're going to go to St. Paul's Cathedral, which is a beautiful classic cathedral, a place that was spared in World War II largely, and we will attend a worship service there as well, and have a tour. It's a fascinating building, and it really, one of the things that St. Paul's Cathedral does is it captures a whole lot of the history of London in one place. We will go to the National Theatre, again, a kind of backstage pass to see how they do, what they do there. And either on this day or on another day, we are working on getting an actor or actors to help us, to work with us a little bit, and let us know how actors do their work and how they come up with a scene. They have a script. How do they do a scene? And they may or may not involve us in that exercise. I really look forward to that, and we are working hard to make that happen. On the Thursday when we're there, we will be going, taking a bus to go, or train, I'm not sure, to see Coventry Cathedral. This is a cathedral that was bombed during World War II. And rather than entirely destroying it, they decided to keep up part of it. They built another cathedral, but they left this there as a monument that remembers the war and also does some reconciling work with Germany to keep it there. So one of the things we're going to be doing there is also participating in a service, a litany of reconciliation, which is a part of the Anglican Mass, or part of the Anglican liturgy. And what's interesting about the service of reconciliation is that it deals with the 7 deadly sins, right? So there it is: lust, pride, envy, gluttony, anger, greed. You know, those are personal things and societal things. They're also the stuff that makes Shakespeare plays, right? Gluttony, sloth, pride, all those things. So we're going to be visiting the 7 deadly sins in church and in the theater. So there's another connection there. One other thing that I'm working on right now is I want to visit some theaters that are working sort of on a community level. There's a whole movement of theaters all over the world. Sometimes they are under the title Theaters of the Oppressed. It's a whole movement that started in Brazil from a man named Augusto Boal, but there are others who've been working at this. One of the things that theater does to practice a play or a musical and to put it on, to put on the production, this is a very good process for people to go through. It builds community, it builds confidence, it empowers people. So there's a whole movement around the world about empowering people to actually to be themselves and to use their voices to communicate, usually in a dramatic production. So I hope that at some point we can see or visit one of those communities that are working at this very important community work. And finally, folks, we will have a lot of time to visit some of the tourist spots and other spots in London, including Trafalgar Square, Big Ben. There's actually a lot of really interesting, very interesting museums in London. There'll be too much to see, including the London Eye and a whole bunch of other things. So do I have one more slide? No, I don't. So I'm going to end there, and I will entertain your questions. What questions do you have? Or I don't know if, Sandra, there's something I should have said that I didn't say.
No, I just wanted to come on and invite people to type in your questions into the attendee chat. It should be at the bottom of your screen. So if you have a question, you can put it in that chat box, and I will read it out for Alan, and he will answer the question. Alan, while we're waiting for questions to come in, I just had a little question. I would like to see a little part of your pre-sermon, pre-speaking voice workout. Can you give us a little snippet of your what you do to get your face and your body ready?
Oh yeah. I do, and I advocate a number of exercises for preachers to do, or worship leaders or storytellers before they start Sunday morning. You know, what's interesting about a lot of our worship is that Sunday morning, it's morning, and our bodies are just waking up, and our voices aren't quite ready to do what they need to do. So a lot of these are full body exercises that I can't replicate right now, but
can you demonstrate just some of the voice exercises you do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I one of the things that I invite people to do is to relax their jaw. One of the things that I've learned through voice lessons is that we don't need a tight jaw to speak. We actually want a loose and relaxed jaw, and we want a loose and relaxed neck. And we actually want a loose and relaxed body to speak. It just gives us a lot more room to breathe and a lot less tension. So shoulders, even stomach. We do weird things with our stomach in class because a lot of us in North America keep our stomachs really tight in. It's just a natural thing that we do.
Because we want to look like we have abs of steel, right?
Yeah, exactly. We want to look like we have abs of steel. But what's happening is that we're using all of our energy to keep our guts in, or to hold other parts of ourselves tight. And what that does is take energy from the body and facial, and from the whole body, which could be used for communication, right? And what's interesting as well about being upfront is a vulnerable thing. So being upfront, whether as an actor or a storyteller or a preacher, you're pretty vulnerable. And the inclination we have is to actually curl in and sort of hide these important parts of ourselves, but we have to stand there. So we work at ways to feel comfortable in a pretty vulnerable position, because there we are standing up in front of people and doing something.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, in your classes, have you seen students who came in pretty stiff, pretty just a talking head kind of thing, and just really get it and really kind of freed up to use their whole bodies?
Yeah, usually within this isn't magic. This is just stuff we could all do. But usually within 45 minutes, we can hear somebody use a different voice than they came in with, right? Just by, part of it is we're getting to know each other, and part of it is that we've just relaxed some muscles, and we've given people permission to speak. Those three things right there will change. One of the things that I've seen is people who have come in who are literally, their whole life is kind of hunched over, and they don't want to speak, and they're literally hunched over. And sometimes just a small change, just to ask them to stand up straight and talk like this, pretend you're confident and see what happens. And I have seen miracles
Wow, that's great.
communicating who learned how to communicate that way.
Well, that's awesome. And
Yeah,
it sounds like on this London tour that you're maybe going to help people who maybe think theater isn't for them. Maybe they're not actors and actresses, but
yeah, yeah.
they'll see how theater applies to their life.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think so. And I think, I mean, some playwrights and some plays, because of when they were written, are sometimes a bit harder to understand. So, for instance, Shakespeare is not everybody's cup of tea, but there are some very some very simple things we can do to make Shakespeare come alive. And I mean, one of the things, I actually took a course with Alan Sapp in Kitchener-Waterloo
Hmm.
some years ago, and Shakespeare makes a whole lot more sense. We did body and voice exercises for an hour and a half, and then we read Shakespeare, and then it made sense. Because
Oh,
Shakespeare is all about using the body to make sounds and to do movement. And once you take Shakespeare off the page and start playing with it with other people, all of a sudden those words make sense. So
interesting.
I hope we can do some of that kind of work in at least a small way. And I think we can find ways to make a lot of this theater quite accessible. We will see at least one Shakespeare play, and then we have some freedom. You have freedom as a person on the tour to see some others. I think we might be seeing an opera as well. We're still kind of working on this. We're not entirely sure yet of what 2019 in summer looks like in London yet. We're still working on that. We're not sure
Well,
what. Go ahead.
that's partly because the schedules aren't posted yet.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Schedules are not posted for what's going on in July at the Globe Theatre. But once we find out what Shakespeare play will be playing that night, we can start very soon working on sort of trying to understand the background of that play
Hmm.
and trying to figure out what some of these words might mean and some of the relationships. We can get into that just as soon as we know what that play will be.
That sounds great. Now, you mentioned with the theater that Shakespeare became more intelligible as you acted it out and used your body. Have you seen examples of that with the Bible too, where
Absolutely.
acting it out, there's just
Yeah.
something fresh that comes out of it?
Yeah, this summer I taught a biblical storytelling class, and it is always amazing what happens when students take a pass. It could be a familiar story, very familiar story, like the story of Zacchaeus, who climbed a tree, and Jesus noticed him, and then Jesus invited him. Jesus invites Zacchaeus to go to Zacchaeus's place. Interesting. And then Zacchaeus has this change of heart while he's with Jesus, and there's all this murmuring around. You know, if you have to tell that story, memorize it and tell it, you have to understand it, and you have to understand the bodies that are in this story, and what the sound of how does Jesus say this, and how does Zacchaeus respond, and what are these voices like, and what are they doing when they say the voices? All of a sudden, the scripture just comes alive in a very different way. So yeah, we don't need Shakespeare to see this. We can do this with the Bible, and we can do this with Paul, and we can do this with genealogies. One student,
Genealogies.
yes.
How does that work?
Oh, this is always a challenge for my biblical storytelling students. There's lots of stories they could tell, or they could take a passage from Paul and tell it. That's a bit more difficult. But some students have elected to do the genealogies and to tell them in an interesting way, and it can be done. It's amazing.
So what have you seen? What have students done with that?
Well, one student started with talking about her son and how her son's father's name is this and grandfather is this. She had a rope with her, and his grandfather is this and his grandmother was this, and so on. So you get this idea that this matters, that who your parents are matters. And then she started with Jesus genealogy and said a word about each person in a familial kind of way. Oh yeah, this great, whoa, right? And so she went a bit off the script, but it was still making a genealogy quite interesting. But she had to do it with her body and her voice. You can't do this as a talking head. It has to be embodied.
Well, that sounds terrific. Do any attendees have any further questions? I wonder, Alan, maybe you can say a little bit about, we know about your background, but how do you see Marilyn, the two of you working together on this tour?
Oh, yes. So, Marilyn and I were on the last trip two summers ago, and Audrey was with us. And Audrey started teaching Marilyn very quickly how to do all the logistic things. You could just see it that Audrey was mentoring Marilyn, because Audrey knew that I was probably incapable of all of all of the detailed things, that I could be a teacher, but all the logistical things, that would have to be somebody else. So, and Marilyn's brilliant at that. She's a very organized person. She's an administrator, and she loves all this stuff too. But she revels in the details of getting all of us on time to the theater. On the subway, and making a lot of the arrangements, of course, for hotels and for restaurants are already made, but there needs to be somebody on the ground who's doing all those logistical things. And then also Marilyn brings again a very strong history in the church. She's been a pastor for give or take 30 years, and now she's a conference pastor of MCEC. And she understands the church, and she loves worship and understands worship. And I'm sure there will be many times when, well, we're going to sing. There are going to be times when we sing, and she will lead the singing, and will know better how to do that. I think we work together quite well. We don't live together right now. I live in Goshen. She lives in Kitchener. And I will live in Kitchener in winter with her, but then be back here. So I kind of live in both places at this time. Yeah, but we're Marilyn and I don't get together often, but when we do, we get together in London. There you go.
That's great. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close things off?
No, I just would, just an encouragement. I think this will be a really, really good time and a rich experience. In the debauchery of the theater, and the grace of the theater, and also in the earthiness of the church, and the beauty of the church. We're going to throw those things together and see what happens.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Alan, and for everyone who's joined us. And we'll hopefully some of you can join Alan and Marilyn next July.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sandra.